know, but that's their opinion. That's why I think, you know, if it's law decides
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Please check in. 15 of you still haven't, so you should if you're not here. 14. Okay, going down. Any questions? Anything in your minds? Dana. I am so glad you asked. That might have been an inclusive question. Thank you. So I explained to you that the semester is some of a work in progress because we haven't actually finished all the videos yet. We haven't recorded all of them, and some of the videos we recorded have not yet been edited. It's actually to tell you just the process. To film a 5-minute video takes about an hour of footage. Like, if you've ever done TV before, it's so many takes. So we usually go to the studio for 8 or 9 hours, and we do maybe 8 videos. And it takes maybe a couple months to have to then post-production edit. It's a lot of work. So what I will do for you, because I love you all so much, is instead of giving you the video, which I don't have, I'll give you the script. So the script is what we're reading. The way this works, we're reading from a teleprompter, right? That's how we do it so well. Reading from a teleprompter is hard. It's not easy. Do not make fun of people read teleprompters. It's not easy. Do it natural. Like, I'm Ron Burgundy, right? When you're reading, no, it's really, like, don't mock the local news people. It's actually really tough to read from a prompter and make it sound natural. It's not easy. So we practice a lot. So what I did was for the class next week, was the class number 5. Actually, I had the video for Dole and the video for Morrison, and for Raish. But for Lopez, I do not have the video. So if you click that link, I don't know if I've shared the permissions yet. Let's see. I may have to actually share the permissions in a minute. Yeah. Okay. So if you click that link, it will pop up. And what you will see is the script. And this is actually what me and Randy are reading. So if you're so inclined to actually keep preparing as you are, read the script, pretend it's in my voice. You know, you can try and mimic it as you best can. But this is the text. So if you want the same sort of study guide, just as a preview, these scripts will form the base of a book. We want to make like a study guide or a supplemental book, so you have the videos and you have the book along with it to actually read it. People like different styles. So maybe another 2 years, this will become a book. And we have scripts for about 60 cases in your book. About 30 of them are done, so you'll get most in the semester. All right, so this one's about 4 pages. You can read it, 1,500 words, and do whatever you like. Okay? And again, if you find any errors in the videos, please send them to me because we're still able to fix them. We're still in the editing process. It's a lot of work, but worth it. All right, any questions on that? No? Okay. In our last session, I started showing you this timeline. And the purpose of this timeline is not to oversimplify too much, but it's to show you that the story of constitutional law has not been constant. It's kind of gone up and down. But what you'll notice is there's some up and down here, up and down here. Once you get to the New Deal, it's only up. It's either up or staying the same. So up to the New Deal, things are still in flux. Once you get to the 1930s, 36, 37, that magical year, you're going straight up. But what I want to do first is give you an exercise to do all this stuff before 36. So let's go to the class notes today. And I'm going to ask you a question 6 times. The exact same question I'm going to ask you 6 times. And this is to prove the point that the answer is probably different in every... Is that me?
No, it's me.
Okay.
I don't know what that was.
You good? Okay, good.
Not sure.
All right, so let's start a poll.
Okay. I don't know.
Computer doesn't like you today. That's okay. Okay. Start polling session. Okay. I once had a professor take a call in class. That was fun. I almost said that once. Okay, so the question is this, right? And we asked you the same question 6 times. Congress enacts a law to regulate the wages of workers at coal mines that ship coal across state lines. Congress finds that the moral conditions in mines are low and the safety conditions are poor. Is this statute constitutional? Okay? And I'm going to ask you this question at 6 different junctures. So the first one is in 1842. That's your first question. 1842. You're asking, Josh, why 1842? You should know why it's 1842, because your outline of cases should always include the year of the case. This is to get you in the mood, so to speak, for the final exam. Not that you want it, but this is how you have to start thinking. Not just what's the answer, but what's the answer and when. And think about it like this. You have restatement first, restatement third. You know, okay. You have restatement 200 years worth, right? You know, where things change all the time. That's the answer in 1842. About 20 of you put your answers in. I'll wait till about 20 of you more put your answers in. They'll go quicker after we get to the second and third ones. I hope. Maybe. Maybe not. All right, let's try it here. Okay, so let's hit stop. Okay. Who's next? Not all of you voted, but we'll move on. Gerald. So what you're thinking here? First off, why did I pick 1842? Why did I pull that number of a hat?
That's the prig.
That's prig, yeah. Good, very good. That's prig. So far so good. Okay. So what you're thinking here, Edward? I'm sorry, Gerald.
I would say no, because the Commerce Clause hadn't really been expanded by that point in time.
Is this question only asking about the Commerce Clause?
No, you could have found it under necessary and proper, but the only thing I can think of that it would connect to would have been the Commerce Clause.
Okay.
And the Commerce Clause wasn't broad enough.
Whoa, no, but you're making a mistake, right? You're making a mistake. What was the key case interpreting the Commerce Clause, the most important case? The Commerce Clause, just commerce. What was the most important case we have? Dana, you there?
Yes.
Dana, what's the most important Commerce Clause case we have? Still to this day.
Gibbons?
Gibbons, very good. What was Gibbons about?
It's about that the defendant had a monopoly, or it's the ship.
With the boats.
Steamboats.
Yeah, the boats. And how did John Marshall define commerce?
He said it was intercourse.
Intercourse, trade, right? And then has that definition of commerce really been changed for the last...
No.
Okay, so I want all of you to understand this point. John Marshall's decision in Gibbons defining commerce hasn't really changed in 200 years. Has not really changed. So when Gerald says the Commerce Clause hasn't been broadened, that's not exactly right. It doesn't matter what commerce changes, right? What has fluctuated, Marcus, is what? Exactly, the implied powers doctrine, right? Again, look at my timeline. Look at my timeline. I put over, it's hard to read, I know it's small, but trust me, it says broad reading of implied powers. This is not a timeline about the Commerce Clause. Let me say that again. This timeline does not show you Commerce Clause. If I made you a timeline about Commerce Clause, it'd be flat, from Gibbons. Maybe a blip here and there, but it's pretty flat. What has expanded is not a Commerce Clause. What's expanded is necessary and proper. Is that Christine?
Kristen, yes.
Oh, I was so close. I was so close. I was off by one letter. And you have an I'm getting your names. I will get them, and then maybe give me a week or two. Yeah. Oh, so close. I said Christine. Man, that's very close. Okay, good. So, Kristen, let me ask you this question. So, if our issue here is, let me go back to our prompt. Congress enacting law to regulate wages of workers in coal mines, right? What are the two clauses we have to think about here?
Well, necessary and proper.
Good.
And the Commerce Clause.
Very good. So let's just start with the easy one, commerce. Is this a regulation of commerce among the several states?
Am I basing that on what I've already read?
Just read those two sentences. That's all you have. Is that, based on Gibbons, is that a regulation of interstate commerce? Just that one sentence.
Yes,
Why?
because they're shipping coal across the.
But what's being regulated?
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Wages.
the
Yeah.
wages. Don't make that mistake. Everyone makes a mistake. Don't be tricked. Congress here is not regulating the shipment of the coal. Congress is regulating the
Wages.
bingo. Everyone heard what you said? Be very careful, because I can trip you up in an exam question really easy like this. Look at what Congress is actually regulating. They're not regulating here the shipment of coal. If they were regulating the shipment of coal, I think it'd be a different story, right? But they're regulating the wages, or maybe even to be precise, the manufacture, how the coal is extracted from the ground. Right? So again, I'll Chris one more time. Is this a regulation of interstate commerce?
No.
It's not. So then we turn to the Commerce Clause. I'm sorry, we turn to Necessary and Proper Clause, right? Sergio, can you fit this wage regulation within Congress's Necessary and Proper Clause powers in 1842?
Yes.
Why do you say yes? Well, what did Justice Story say in Prigg? I mean, that's the case we're talking right there. We have McCulloch and you have Prigg. Those are two cases I think you can rely on there. Can Congress reach, through its necessary and proper powers, wage regulations?
If it's the understanding of necessary and proper, that
How did Marshall define necessary and proper in college? That's our key test. You don't think of it exactly, but what's the general gist?
just adequate, proper.
What's that word? Clay? How did Marshall understand necessary and proper in McCulloch? He gave a test. Give it a test.
Whatever is convenient
Convenient. Yeah. Convenient to what though?
to the federal government.
The federal government doing what?
In regulating commerce.
Very good. So, very good. So everyone heard what Clay said. Under McCulloch, if there's some sort of means that are convenient to regulating commerce, those ends are proper, then Congress can do it. So Clay, could you sweep in a wage regulation under the rule in Prigg?
Absolutely.
I think you could. I think the answer is yes here. I mean, Congress didn't try doing something like this in the 1840s. They would have tried for another 70 or 80 years, right? But I think the answer to this first question is yeah. Let's see, we got pretty close, 60-40. Pretty close. Yeah, I think the answer under Prigg and McCulloch is yeah, right? If you take the word convenient to mean what's convenient, is it legitimate to regulate wages for a dangerous profession like coal mining? Maybe not, but I think this fits under Story's opinion. Anyone want to disagree? We don't know. It's a hypothetical. We can't go back and ask them, but I think the answer is yeah. I think the answer is yes. Anyone have a question on this one? All right, let's try another one. And then Janice, you're on deck, just so you know. All right, so the same question, number 2, the year is 1869. Same question, same facts. The year is 1869 now. And I'll give you another 20 seconds, 30 seconds to get your answer. And And boy, if you got that one wrong, don't be upset. I think it's actually a close call. So if you weren't sure, don't be mad at yourself. I think it was a close call. I think yes is a slightly better answer. Okay. Another 10 seconds. I know not all. Some of you are not voting, which is annoying. But this is not graded. I don't grade you on it. This is for your own thing. There's science behind it. It's not just me making stuff up. When you put an answer down on paper or on your phone, and then you're told, no, that's wrong, you learn a lot more than if you don't commit. You learn a lot more when you commit to something and getting it wrong. So actually, there's a lot of value in being corrected immediately. This is what's called formative assessment, right? Usually, you're only assessed at your final exam or midterm, and then it's too late. This is, you're getting assessed in the middle of class, right in the beginning of the semester, so you get this feedback. All right, Janice, you want to tell me your thinking here? Number 2 in 1869.
Okay, so I said no.
Okay, tell me why.
And so based on the.
By the way, why did I pick 1869? Let's start there.
I don't know.
Well, what happened?
That might give you a good number for you.
No. It's not just a good number. What happened in 1869 that we studied?
No. So that was the DeWitt case.
DeWitt and also. Yeah, DeWitt. Very good. Yeah, DeWitt. You're right.
I said DeWitt, so you said the other one.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Hepburn, I think, was 1870, so I'll be precise. So let's, yeah, no, you're right. I don't want to confuse you more, but yeah, DeWitt's the correct case, right? And what was DeWitt about?
Okay, so that one was about the petroleum-based oils.
Very good. And what did Congress try doing there in DeWitt? What was the law in DeWitt?
Okay, so they wanted to criminalize the sale of oil.
Was this oil being shipped across state lines?
I'm trying to remember. No, it wasn't. It wasn't being shipped. No, it was about taxes. It was about the taxing of the other oils.
It was local sales oil, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start again. So is wages of coal mine workers interstate commerce, Janice?
Wages and coal.
Is the wage of the coal miners, is that interstate commerce? By itself?
Based on
those two sentences.
No.
Why not? The answer is the same as before.
I mean, it's not across the state.
Yeah. Under Gibbons, same answer. The wages of the coal miners is not interstate commerce. That's easy. So then, Janice, finish up. What's your necessary and proper clause answer?
So it's no, because according to the DeWitt case, if it's too remote and too uncertain.
Yes, perfect. Remember what you said. Say it again.
Too remote and too uncertain.
So we're giving the back. Very good. She's right. DeWitt was Chief Justice Chase's opinion, right? And go to our timeline. See, when you visualize this, it makes a little bit more sense, right? Prigg goes all the way up there, and then DeWitt zoop, comes all the way down, right? In DeWitt, Chase said, if it's too remote, right? If the connection between the thing being regulated and interstate commerce is too remote, you can't regulate it, right? Does the wages of coal miners have some sort of effect in interstate commerce? Yeah, sure it does, but it's too remote. Again, how do you compare convenient, what Clay said, with what Janice said, remote? Those are not the same tests, right? And this is why on our graph, McCulloch is based to the same level as DeWitt. I think DeWitt even went less than McCulloch, but you can't, what's cold and ice cold, you can't go much lower than the first rung. So DeWitt peeled back what Prigg offered. Everyone with me? Any questions on that, right? So I think in 1869, the statute becomes unconstitutional. It's a crazy thing. The same exact statute fluctuates depending on what year you're in. This is what I'm trying to drill into your heads with this exercise. Let's see you guys in this question. Okay. Okay, good. 80% of you. Okay. So the first one's a little bit closer. I think this one you're getting the swing of things. All right? And Mia, you're on deck with the next one. So let me start the poll. Okay. The next question is, the year is 1895. Okay, so take another 30 seconds and put your votes in. seconds. Okay, Mia, what do you think?
I think it's just like the last one.
Okay, tell me why.
Because just like DeWitt Knight, they said that like the fact that an article is manufactured just for the export to another state doesn't of itself make that article an article of interstate commerce.
Mhm.
So here we're just talking about wages within a state. We're not even talking about like, wages of people that are going to go out of state. So
What case do we have from 1895? What case were we looking at?
EC Knight,
EC Knight. If you notice, EC Knight was, I think, 1890?
5.
I'm sorry, 1895, right? United States versus EC Knight, 1895. That's right. Right. So again, keep track of years. Mia, just what was the test in EC Knight? How did they distinguish? Again, this is still not interstate commerce. It's all necessary and proper. What was the test they gave you in EC Knight to decide whether some sort of activity can be swept into the necessary proper clause? It was very similar to the remote test. Very, very similar. What did they ask for?
This was the, it can't be secondary, incidental, or indirect.
Yes,
It
it's
has
called
to
the
be
direct effect. Perfect, thank you, you read my mind. It's what's called a direct effect test. So if it's a direct effect in commerce, it can be regulated. If it's an indirect effect in commerce, it can't be regulated. So here I think Mia is correct, that the wages has an indirect effect in interstate commerce, because if you pay people less, maybe they ship shoddy goods, right? But it's not a direct effect. So under the rule in EC Knight, okay, let me write these out so you have the answers. Oops. So under the rule in EC Knight, I think this is unconstitutional. Okay? Everyone with me? Everyone with me so far? All right. The next one, 1903, and then Noel, you're on deck here. So I'm going to run the poll again. Oh, let me see the results for that one. Okay. 85%. We're getting better. I think we're in a good place. All right, Noel, take a look at number 4, which is 1903.
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh, yeah, Marquia, please.
Can you repeat the part about the direct effect?
Yeah. The rule in EC Knight said that Congress can regulate local activity, that is wages, if it has a direct effect on interstate commerce. If the effect on interstate commerce is only indirect, Congress can't regulate the local wages. Make sense? Okay. So take a look at number 4, 1903. Go ahead and vote, and Noel, you're on deck. Another 20, 30 seconds. All right, Noel, what do you think?
So, in 1903 is the Champion versus Ames,
Very good. Champion versus Ames, very good.
the lottery case.
The lottery case is very good.
And in this situation, they deemed that transporting lottery from state to state was interstate commerce.
Good.
And
But also, it wasn't just about the lottery tickets and commerce code. What else is in there? What do you always have to look for? Not just commerce. You always have to think about 2 things.
you go back to the necessary
Very
and
good.
proper.
It's always operating in the background. All these cases, you're never going to see a case that's only commerce plus, except maybe Gibbons. That's the only one I can think of. It's always necessary and proper plus commerce. So, Noel, what did John Marshall Harlan say in Champion versus Ames? Not only was there transporting of lottery tickets, but why else did Congress have the power to prohibit them? It wasn't just about the shipment, right? They could prohibit them altogether. What gave Congress that power? Quinn, you want to take a step?
Can you repeat the question?
Always, if you're next, always be listening to the question. Harlan didn't only say Congress would regulate the shipment of interstate lottery tickets. He said they could be prohibited altogether, right? Banned. What gave Congress that authority?
Is it necessary and proper clause?
Right. And why? What was the reason Harlan gave that Congress could prohibit their shipment?
Well, he said it didn't matter whether it was regulation or prohibition.
Right. And so, but what was the purpose Congress was trying to achieve there?
Public morality?
Morality. Very good. Very good. Harlan said that the elimination of this vice, this sin, lottery tickets, was a legitimate end. Again, what does it sound like? McCulloch. Let the end be legitimate, right? He was saying that the purpose of banning lottery tickets was valid because of the morality issue, therefore Congress can do it. If you notice, they put in this question that the safety conditions and the poor moral conditions, right? I think that, well, you tell me, Quinn, would this statute be constitutional in 1903? You tell me. I know the answer. You tell me.
Okay. Well, looking at public morality, no.
Yeah.
But,
Well, what did Harlan say, Quinn? Could the lottery tickets be prohibited?
oh, yeah, they could be.
So what about here? Could Congress then prohibit these low wages in the coal mines?
Yes, under necessary and proper clause.
She's right. Yeah, the answer here is yes. The answer here is yes. Right? This statute's constitutional. Very good. Very good. And the reason why is because of Harlan's opinion in the lottery case, the Champion versus Ames, that they didn't get rid of the direct effects test, right? The direct effects test is still there. They didn't overturn E.C. Knight. But under the necessary and proper clause, they can say that this is a legitimate end of eradicating immorality. And because it's a legitimate end, it can sweep in this local activity. This is what you have to ask yourself. We have a local activity, payment of wages. Can Congress sweep that in? Yes, it's legitimate because of morality. Now, is it a Commerce Clause issue? Harlan was a little bit fuzzy on that. A little bit fuzzy. You can tell he didn't really like the direct effects test. He didn't want it, but he couldn't really overturn it. He didn't have the votes. So do this thing about morality to sort of, sidestep it. Everyone with me. But in 1903, I think it's a constitutional statute.
Jeff, can you,
Yeah.
1 second. Can you go back just a little bit
Yeah.
to the EC Knight one? When you said that was the direct effect, I'm like,
E.C. Knight
where are
said
the direct and indirect effects in that? I'm trying to read it. I'm not seeing it.
it's described like that more carefully later. But if you read the language in E.C. Knight, it says that the effect in commerce was basically not remote, it was too direct.
In
In E.C. Knight.
EC Knight.
Yeah.
This is
The sugar case, monopoly case.
the manufacturing.
Exactly, right? Manufacturing comes before the
Right.
commerce, right?
Right.
So the relationship between the
So it doesn't
manufacturing
have a
is
direct.
indirect.
Got it. Okay. That's where it is. Okay,
Right?
so that's where it is.
So they call it the secondary test. I'm telling you, later on it comes known as a direct indirect test.
Got
I'll
it,
give you the
okay.
name that you'll see in the later cases.
Got it, okay.
But secondary is just as well, because first you have manufactured, second you have
And
commerce,
then-
shipment.
Okay.
Good?
Good, yeah.
All right, let's do one more. Name tag, I'm sorry?
Oh, Vincent, sorry.
That's okay, Vincent. I'll get you eventually. All right, Vincent, let's go to number 5. We're almost done with this exercise. It takes half an hour, but it's worth it. And the year is 1935. Very, very important year, 1935.
Yes.
Oh, no, not yet, not yet. Give people a chance to answer first.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, hang tight, put your hands on your phone.
Jumped ahead there.
That's okay, I know you're eager. Your own vicious lawsuit, that's wonderful. 8 o'clock at night, you're ready to roll.
Can you answer?
All right, another 10 seconds or so. I know some of you aren't voting, but whatever. Your loss, not mine. All right, Vincent, what do you think? Well, first off, what's 1935? What's like significant about that year? What do we?
That's the Schechter Poultry Corporation.
Yeah, the Schechter Poultry case, right? And what was that case about?
That was, there was the live poultry code that they had some provisions in there against straight, or I guess it was requirement of straight killing, where it didn't allow. Well, there was other things too, but it didn't allow someone to like pick out specific chickens.
Good. But just more simply, did the law in Schechter Poultry regulate commerce among the several states? Did it regulate the shipment of chickens?
No, it didn't.
What did it regulate?
It regulated the purchasing of
The
chickens.
slaughter.
Yeah.
Okay. The law in Schechter Poultry, we'll do this in a minute in more detail, but the law in Schechter Poultry did not regulate the shipment of the chickens, it regulated how they were slaughtered. And generally you slaughter a chicken in one state. I guess you could have a chicken on a railroad flying down a train track and slaughter. I mean, I guess you could do that, right? But messy, feathers everywhere. But the actual act was not interstate commerce. So because, Vincent, we don't have interstate commerce, what clause we look at?
The necessary and proper.
Okay, very good. So Schechter Poultry was regulating local slaughter of chickens. This is regulating local wages. What's the answer here?
This one was difficult because they did have like another issue where they talked about wages, and so I switched my answer.
You switched your answer.
Yeah.
What's your final answer?
So my final answer was the unconstitutional.
Okay. Let's see what you got. B is correct. But closer. Yeah. So I think this is unconstitutional. And for the reason being, the court still abides by the direct effects test. Right? E.C. Knight is still good law at this point. E.C. Knight is still good law. And the Schechter court relies on saying that the effect in commerce is too remote, too indirect, it's secondary. Right? Sure, maybe slaughtering chickens in a more effective manner might impact interstate commerce, but only indirectly, only in a secondary effect, right? First comes the slaughter, then comes the shipment. There it is, you got it now?
Yeah.
First you slaughter the chickens, and then you ship them. But this is not regulating the shipment of the chickens, it's how you slaughter them.
So is
Yeah.
question
Either one, whoever wants it better.
But in Schechter, they weren't shipping them out of state after they had gotten them. They were slaughtering them after they had come in from out of state.
Right, so there's never an interstate commerce at all.
Which is my issue. Are they not regulating an entire industry? Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we'll do Schechter Poultry in more detail. The answer here is no.
Right.
We're on the same page here, right?
We are now.
We are now, good. That any effect on interstate commerce is too indirect. It's too indirect. Want to talk about that?
I said, so literally the slaughter of chickens comes second.
Well, the chickens were shipped,
Yeah.
then they were slaughtered, and then they were perhaps shipped
I was just
again.
thinking like.
But they were only regulating one aspect of it.
The
They
slaughter.
regulate the
Yeah.
entire industry, that is an effect.
You have to be very careful when I ask these questions. What is being regulated? Are you regulating the shipment of chickens from Pennsylvania to New York? Or are you regulating the slaughter of the chickens once you get to New York? Or are you regulating the entire field from top to bottom? From egg to, Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? The entire from end to end. I lived in Louisville for a year, which is the home of KFC. I went to Colonel Sanders' grave and I left a bucket. What?
He's a sell out of his trunk.
Yeah, he actually died a poor man. This is a true story. So, Colonel Sanders he wasn't actually a military colonel. It's a Kentucky colonel. It's like an honorific title. But he didn't believe in stock. He didn't trust banks. So when I forget which company bought KFC, but someone bought KFC and they said, "We'll give you a share in this company." He's like, "No, just give me cash." So basically, he sold over everything. He sold his company. He also sold the likeness to Colonel Sanders. So like the cartoon. So he couldn't even use his own image to market chicken. And he actually tried marketing Colonel Sanders' chicken. He got in trouble because he didn't own his own damn likeness to license chicken. It's a very sad. Just Google Colonel Sanders. Very sad story. He died a poor man, even though KFC more cases of McDonald's? Just Google it. I think there might be. It's very popular overseas, much more than the United
So this
States.
is kind of off. I live in China, and they have like this place called Mr. Lee's Chicken. They have the same likeness, but it's an Asian guy. You can see the eyes like.
That's funny. Oh my God. That's funny.
China doesn't have good IP laws.
Okay.
They rip.
That is funny.
I was in Hong Kong a few months ago, and they have the most everything's bootleg. It's like all fake Star Wars, like Space Wars, right? And if you just look at the logo, it looks exactly the same, but it's different. And they have like fake Harry Potter books. They have fake everything. It's insane. Like just go to a market and just everything is just like knockoff. Instead of like Lego, it's Lago. You know, it's like one letter off, but it looks exactly the same. Like if you, I have some pictures. I'll show you later. If you're not careful, it's like wow, buy a $200 Lego set, and it's like all like this garbage stuff.
Michael Jordan can have a flat top too.
All right. Any other questions on 1935? Yes. Yeah.
You said that did you say any effect on interstate commerce is indirect? I thought I understood, then I thought I heard this.
Well, the test for EC9 was is it effect direct or indirect?
Right.
And if it's indirect, then it doesn't count. Yes, direct effect on interstate commerce.
Okay.
But let me get the next one. Let me do the last one, okay?
Okay.
And I think it might answer your question.
Okay.
So, that's Michelle, all right? Michelle, you're on deck. Last one, then we move on to the actual stuff for today. 1937. Think about it. Question number 6. Go. And then you're almost done with this, but I promise you, this will be very valuable for you. You'll get this. If you don't get it, it's your own fault. I did what I could do. Huge year 37. Very, very significant year in constitutional law. Probably the most important turning points in our Supreme Court history. All right, another 20 seconds.
When you say that we need to know the cases, do we need to know like NLRB v. Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation, or if we said Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation?
That's fine. You can abbreviate. I'll know what you're talking about.
Okay.
You don't have to spell it all out. All right, Michelle, what do you think here?
What if we cut off corporation?
I say yes.
You think it's constitutional. You want to tell me why?
So this was during the era of
Mia gave away the answer, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She ruined the surprise. All right, Michelle, what do you think?
So I said yes because basically, in that case, they made a point
It's just NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel. Just,
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
That Congress had the authority to protect interstate commerce from
Good.
burdens and obstruction.
Very good. So again, let's just be very careful, Michelle. Is the payment of local wages interstate commerce? Is that by itself interstate commerce?
No.
No. The answer is still no to that. Everyone just be careful. Jones and Laughlin Steel did not really modify the Commerce Clause interpretation. It modified bingo. And what does the court do with the direct effects test? Overruled. Basically, E.C. Knight is killed, right? Between Darby and Jones and Laughlin Steel, they're decided back to back. You can tell which one did it. But by the time you get to Darby, I think was that 37? 41, sorry. By the time you get to Darby, a couple years later, it's really clear. But the direct effects test is thrown out, and Michelle finished up. What test is it replaced with?
Substantial.
Come on, you're almost there. Oh, you're almost there. Yes, you got it. Bingo. Done. Substantial effects, right? If a local activity has a substantial effect on interstate commerce, Congress can then regulate that local activity under the necessary and proper clause. Yes, if you got it. If a local activity has a substantial effect on interstate commerce, then Congress can regulate that local activity under its necessary and proper powers. Right? That's the opposite of direct effect. That is, even if the effect is secondary, even if it's an indirect effect, right? Congress can regulate it. Even though manufacture comes first and commerce comes second, Now Congress can regulate the manufacture. That's Darby, right? Congress can regulate the slaughtering of chickens, not just the shipment of chickens. So NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel was probably the most important case you've never heard of, right? And that's why on our timeline, right, you have NLRB goes up here. Then you have Darby goes up here, gets even greater. Then you get to Wickard, which has what's called the aggregation principle. We'll get to there in a bit, right? But those three cases, NLRB, Darby, and Wickard, basically blew the lid off. Because once you get to Wickard, you're off to the races, right? At that point, the necessary and proper clause can sweep in virtually any local activity. Virtually any local activity. There's not much that can be excluded. We'll find a couple things that are on the outside. For the reading for next class, we've already done it. We get to Lopez and Morrison. And what's important to remember about Lopez and Morrison, these cases were actually commerce cases. Right? Lopez involved, can Congress regulate a gun in a school zone? Morrison was, can Congress regulate domestic violence? And what the court basically said is, carrying a gun is not economic activity. Therefore, the Commerce Clause is not implicated. And domestic violence is not economic activity. Therefore, Commerce Clause doesn't matter. But neither of those cases roll back the necessary and proper clause. When you get to Raich, which you'll have next class, Raich opened the door for necessary and proper. Flies wide open. Okay, but that's for next class. But for here, what I'm concerned about is Knight, overruled. Champion v. Ames, still good law. Hammer, gets overruled. Schechter, never ruled, but you wouldn't want to cite it. Maybe you will. But then NLRB, Darby, Wickard, off to the races. Okay. Any questions on those so far? We'll go through each case in turn. I want you to understand the big picture first, then we can drill down to the specifics. Questions? All right. You want to give me the facts, please, in Schechter Poultry Corp. versus United States.
Sure. So I believe the
Oh, by the way, the results in this last one? Whoa, 100%. I've never had 100% of anything.
You can switch your answer.
Come on, guys. Come on. You just.
We're old.
Not to change your response after that.
We are smart, man.
Okay, then I'm going to click stop as soon as the thing's over. Okay, fine.
Yeah, we've never had 100% on any.
I know.
We've ever done. We are together now tonight.
Well, enjoy it because you cheated.
1 month. Please enjoy it.
You cheated. Mike, give me the facts, please, and Schechter Poultry, guys.
Yes, sir. So this case, their plaintiff, the Schechter brothers, they operate a slaughterhouse.
Where's the slaughterhouse located?
In New York.
In Brooklyn. Very good.
And so they mostly purchase the chicken locally, but once in a while they got a shipment from Philadelphia. And they slaughter the chicken in-house, and then they sell it back to retailers or to consumers.
Okay, very good.
And
Did they ship the chickens themselves over state lines?
I would say, which point
Did the Schechter brothers ship the chickens across state lines?
I mean, like when they purchase
After they slaughter the chickens, after they kill them?
No,
Okay,
they
very
sell
good.
it to local.
They were staying in Brooklyn, probably, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right. Ma'am, what's your name? Name tag? Name? What? Boone? Okay, so let me ask you this question. All right. What exactly was the government trying to regulate here? Well, what exactly did the government do here? Why were the Schechter brothers in trouble? Let's start with that.
Violated and they're in trouble with lots of counts.
So including the wage and the hours.
What did they do that they weren't supposed to do? Let's wrap up that.
Trying to the life poultry code.
Okay, good. What's the live poultry code?
A code of sales construction for the life poultry industry.
Okay, and what did that code require then? What were they not allowed to do under this live poultry code?
Not to work in excess of 40 hours.
Okay, but
And also maintain minimum wage.
okay, what else? But the important ones, like the big thing they were required to do. The important thing.
Unfair competition.
And what was that? Kyle?
Yeah, so you said the question of chief importance is
Yeah.
going to be the wage and hour regulations.
Okay.
So they wanted to, as far as unfair competition, it's
Yeah.
that if you hire people that you're only going to pay a very small amount of money and you're not going to provide.
What was the most important
Straight killing chicken?
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, thank you. Oh, by far. Farther than the wages. Wages are mundane.
All
What
right.
was the straight killing thing?
So yeah, straight killing is the practice of requiring persons purchasing poultry for resale to accept the run of any half coop.
What does that mean?
Basically, from what I understand, like they can't pick the chicken that they want to slaughter.
Very
right?
good. Very good.
I don't really, maybe because of context, the fact that we're in 2018 didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I'll tell you why it made sense. So, anyone here Jewish? So, I don't think you be. So, the Jewish faith has a dietary system called kosher. Everyone heard of kosher?
Yes, I've heard that.
Okay, so if you see any product in the store has a little K or U on it, that means the product's kosher. One of the tenets of having kosher meat is that you can't have a sick animal. That the animal has any imperfection. If it's sick, you can't eat it. It's not kosher. Right? So for example, if a chicken has, cuts on its neck, right? You can't eat it. The Schechter brothers were actually kosher butchers. In fact, the word shecht in Hebrew, or Yiddish really, means to slaughter. The name actually means someone who slaughters animals. Very common that your last name is what your profession is. That's how last names are created by and large, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's like the last name's Carpenter, they probably did wood at some point, right? Yeah, that's true. They're blacksmiths. Yeah, they work with tin and various metals. So, it's true. You learn something, right? So, under the Jewish faith, you can't have a sick chicken to eat. So, the entire premise of the business was if they got a sick chicken, they would just throw it out. But they couldn't because this was straight killing. You had to eat whatever chicken they got. They couldn't pick and choose. So this was really the religious liberty case. That wasn't a thing in 1935, but it was a free exercise case, right? The government was saying you can't slaughter chickens in the manner which religion requires. So this case was totally misunderstood. These guys were thrown in jail. That's why the wage thing didn't really matter. I didn't mean to be picking on you, Steve, but that was like secondary, right? The main thing was a regulation of the slaughtering of chickens.
I completely missed that.
It's in there.
I thought that, no, I saw it in here, but I didn't know that was the main
Now
thing.
that's why you have class, right?
I mean,
See? That's right. That's why I get paid the small bucks, right? You'll all be out earning in a couple years. Don't worry. All right. So Drew, let me ask this question. So we have this code, right? Was this code enacted by Congress? Did Congress legislate this code?
Yes.
Did Congress set the standards of how to kill chickens and what the wage and hours law were? Did Congress establish those rules? True?
No, sorry, it was the president.
Wait a minute, wait. The president can make laws? What are you talking about? That's not right. How can that be? How can the president make laws?
They had an act called the National Industrial Recovery Act.
Yeah.
And it authorized the president to use codes of fair competition.
Wait a minute, what's a code? What do you mean a code? Look, I discussed this the first day of class, right? Article 1, Section 1, right? All legislative powers here granted in Congress. Congress makes legislation, not the president. What's going on, Drew? How can this be? How can this be right? How can the president enact codes of fair competition? Congress give him that power?
Yeah, we're saying that they authorize them through this act that they passed.
So Congress did this, right? Congress gave the president and the executive branch the authority to enact local codes, and not just codes in Brooklyn, codes throughout the country. And this is, I won't describe it. This was allowing industry and labor to set their own rules. The idea was, if you let people regulate themselves, it'll be great. Did not work out well. Did not work out well. But you had the National Industrial Recovery Act. You think NRA did something very different, but back then NRA was this federal regulation. It was actually a blue eagle. You can't tell from this photograph because it's black and white, but it was a blue eagle. They put this in the window. I think I have a picture of it in the video. So the first question is, Delbert, can Congress give the president the power to enact all these regulations without any sort of guidance? No, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
You can't give the president, the whole point of Congress is to divide the power.
Yeah. So there's one portion of the case which I don't think gets enough attention in your book, but I'll discuss it briefly. It's called the Non Delegation Doctrine. The Non Delegation Doctrine says that Congress cannot delegate the legislative power to the president unless it gives enough guidance, right? You can have, let's try this. Is that Jason? Jason, what's an agency? Government? What does that mean, an agency? We have, the Food and Drug Administration, the Social Security Administration, IRS, ICE, whatever agency you want. What exactly is an agency?
It's an organization that enforces something the government wants.
So which branch of government does an agency fall into? Executive branch, okay, you're right. What's a regulation?
Regulation would be something that would regulate the business that they're engaged in.
Who writes regulations? Who drafts and proposes them?
Well, it can be done in the agency and Congress.
Not Congress. What does Congress enact? Laws. Don't forget this. Congress enacts laws. Agencies put out regulations. Right? So Ross, what's the difference between a regulation and a law? Well, first of all, how does the bill become a law? Let's just go back to basics.
It has to be approved by a certain number by the House of the Congress.
Has to be a majority in the House of Representatives and a majority in the Senate. Very good. Then what happens?
And the Supreme Court.
No,
the president.
wrong answer. Supreme Court's not involved in that. Yeah.
The president has to see whether or not he agrees with it.
He signs it. That's law. Does the president have to sign regulations? Ross?
Executive.
No.
President does not sign regulations. Does Congress vote on regulations? No. So why would anyone pass a statute? You can just go to regulations. Isn't it a lot easier?
Well, the regulation gets power from the statute, so you can't just pass a regulation without having a statute saying you can pass these regulations.
Well, what the regulation says, like the NRA, the president can enact fair labor codes, period. That's all it says. The president can enact fair labor codes, that's all it says. And the president makes the thing about the straight killing, the president thing about the wage and hour laws. Why can't that work?
I mean, doesn't it have to go off of, the statute has to, give power to an agency to then
It says,
create those regulations
this,
and.
the statute says, we give the agency the power to enact fair labor codes. Just do that. That's what happened in this case. That's all the statute says. Agency has the power to make these fair regulations. You decide what fair means. Dana, what do you think? Well, good question.
What she asked?
She asked, it's given the president the power. Let me say it like this. When you give power to an executive agency, be it president, or it could be the secretary, whatever. So the question is this. When Congress passed a statute like this case, it says that the agency has the power to enact fair regulation codes in all these different cities. Can that happen?
Not if the non-delegation doctrine applies to.
Okay, so again, so now tell me again, what's this non-delegation doctrine? I don't know if you're familiar with it.
The Congress can't delegate powers without providing guidelines.
Very good, very good. So there was this doctrine, which doesn't really get much weight anymore, but still exists, that says if Congress wants to give an agency power, they have to give it guidance, direction. They can't just say, pass all laws that are fair. Okay? That was the law in Schechter Poultry. Right? Schechter Poultry said that this was a violation of the non-delegation doctrine, that Congress can't give such an open-ended delegation of authority to the executive branch. But let me give you a little dirty secret. It's probably not good law anymore. Right? The non-delegation doctrine had a really good year in 1935, and it's been downhill since. The Supreme Court would basically abandon Schechter Poultry. It's never been overruled formally. But today, Congress can act some really vague delegations, right? For example, the Federal Communications Commission shall regulate the Internet in a fair way. I don't know what the hell that means, but that'd be fine, right? The agency shall have fair labor codes. That's fine. So the non-delegation doctrine has no more teeth in it, much like chicken, they have no teeth. But at least in Schechter Poultry, chicken have teeth? No. No, they got little beaks. Yeah. At least in Schechter Poultry, right? The answer was this is a violation of non-delegation doctrine, right? Perfect time. I got you before you left. Perfect time, right? Okay. What's that guy? What's that?
Oh, we didn't read that.
No, it was in your book. That's what I'm teaching
So
you.
non-delegate, those words are not in here.
No,
Oh my
they're
God.
not. They're in
I'm
here.
sitting here looking all, oh my God.
That's why I said it's not done in your book. I got to change the excerpt. Randy and I fight over this every edition to try and, because everything you add, it makes it look bigger, and you have to take stuff out. It's a very hard process. It's a struggle. And he has some, because the problem is he teaches ConLaw in 6 hours. I only have 4. So he's like, yeah, throw it all in, but not. Right?
So the non-delegation doctrine applies to agencies and to the president?
Yeah, it's the executive branch as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah, both. Okay. But that's not why Schechter Poultry is in your book, right? It's in your book about the Commerce Clause. I think it's a more important non-delegation case, but I always want to teach it. So, Glynis, why can Congress, or the executive branch, to be precise, why does the government have not the power to regulate the local killing of chickens? In this case, why does the court find that the labor codes here are unconstitutional? Okay, why is the slaughtering of chickens not interstate commerce? Okay, that's common clause. What about necessary profit clause? Okay, they apply the EC9 direct effect test. Does the local slaughtering of chickens have a direct effect in the commerce limits? The answer is no. That's it. So this is an easy enough case if you apply EC9. Right? If you apply the EC9 test, this is easy. It's only perhaps indirect or secondary effect in interstate commerce, not direct. Okay, so that's the holding of Schechter Poultry. The other stuff's a lot more interesting. Yes, Kristen.
Okay, so you referenced the direct test from EC Knight, and so that's the equivalent of when he said close and substantial?
Yes.
Okay.
Close, secondary, remote, these are all the same concepts. It's the same thing as what Justice Chase did in DeWitt, the same sort of idea. What's the fit, the connection, how close is it between the local activity and interstate commerce?
So they're just changing their own wording as they write their opinion.
Yeah, which makes it very unfortunate for you. But, DeWitt called it remote, EC and I called it secondary. Here it's called direct versus indirect. It's all the same thing, just different words. Wouldn't be easy for you, would it? I mean, yeah, keep in mind, this is over the course of 80 years? I mean, a lot of time is lapsing between 1842 and 1932. I mean, almost 90 years, yeah. So, I mean, 90 years lapses, and lots of different judges come, they live, they die, so you can't expect too much now. They didn't realize they were writing for law students trying to suffer through stuff in the year 2018. Maybe they did, I don't know. Justice Scalia always said heroes dissent in such colorful language so that to be in case books and kids would read them. He wrote his dissents to be in case books, and that's why they're here. We'll read a bunch of them. All right, any other questions on chapter poultry? Yes.
The other question is more general to the Commerce Clause. So the analysis for the Commerce Clause specifically is whether or not a particular activity affects.
No, necessary and proper. If you say affect, if you say the word affect, you're out of Commerce Clause land. The second you say affect, you're talking about necessary and proper clause.
So we take out this because I'm not asking. However, I should ask the question about the necessary and proper clause.
But that's exactly right. If you're asking about the Commerce Clause, you this is different. If actual activities intercourse among the states. If the answer is yes, it's intercourse among the states, then it's a Commerce Clause. Anything else, you're necessary and proper clause. Once you say effect, direct, indirect, secondary, whatever, substantial, at that point you're necessary and proper clause. Don't get this messed up if you can, because it happens every You got it now?
Okay, so okay, got it.
The second use the word affect, and why this is so hard is the court doesn't always say it. They'll say affect this or affect that. They won't mention necessary and proper. You have to know what's going on. All John Morton effect is what they're all talking about. It's almost lazy that they don't discuss it. It's very frustrating. Thank you. I'm glad we agree on this. They're lazy. They don't want to talk about two clauses. They can talk about one, but they're doing two. Yeah.
So you're making so there's a connection between this and EC Knight.
What's this? Objection?
Yes. The Poultry Corp.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a situation that it's construed as narrow?
No. Well, Schechter Poultry is where do I have on the thing? Oh, it's over here. Schechter Poultry is at the same level as EC Knight, maybe a little bit broader.
Okay.
But I mean, it could technically. Randy and I actually fought with this one. I would have dropped Schechter Poultry back down to Knight, but it sort of screws up the continuity. We actually had a very long discussion about this, and I usually defer to him. But I think I would put Schechter Poultry in the same level as EC Knight. But I don't get to win these battles always. Pick the fights carefully. All right. Any questions on Schechter Poultry? To the next case, right? So Schechter Poultry is 1935. Between 1935 and 1937, a lot of stuff happened. What you have to know about this period is that President Roosevelt had just run for re-election in 36. And he won on a landslide ballot. He was extremely popular. And his party, the Democratic Party, had won landslide ballots and had majorities in both houses of Congress. At that point, the only conservative institution left in the country was the court. Because over the past 12 years, I think there have been 12 years of Republican presidents in a row. And they had appointed a number of conservative justices. Now, not all of them were conservative, which is why people get this messed up a lot. President Hoover was basically a progressive, which means kind of liberal, and he appointed some moderate to the court. But by the time he got to 36, you had this situation where you had a 5-4 court. You had some cases went 5-4 with conservatives, where they would strike down federal and state labor laws, and in some cases go 5-4 with the liberal wing, and then they would uphold the labor laws. And the center of the court, the swing vote, was Justice Owen Roberts. No relation to John Roberts, but Justice Owen Roberts. So now, here's the conventional story. It's not true. But what law students have been taught for years is that Owen Roberts changed his position in response to Roosevelt. So what happened? In, was it February or March of 1937, Franklin Roosevelt announced what became known as the court packing scheme. We're hearing about it today. Right? There's nothing new. And under the court packing scheme, Roosevelt would have had the ability to appoint one new justice for every justice of the age of 70. Now, he said, we need to do this because the justices are overworked. Nah, that wasn't the reason, right? They weren't that overworked. The reason why is that they were voting to strike down his stuff and his agenda. So Roosevelt proposed this in early 37. And then about maybe a couple weeks later, the Supreme Court decides a case called West Coast Hotel v. Parish. We'll study it later this semester. West Coast Hotel v. Parish. And that case upheld a minimum wage law. It upheld it. Meanwhile, a year earlier, the Supreme Court had held a minimum wage law unconstitutional. Specifics not important. There's, Owen Roberts was in the majority in one case, and he flipped to the other. Owen Roberts switched because of Roosevelt. That Roosevelt said, we're going to pack the court and put pressure on you. And he said, no, don't pack us. I'll vote with the liberals and be nice. Now, that's what students were taught for generations. It's simply wrong. It's a myth. Roberts had cast his vote in that case before the court packing scheme was announced. It was always something for moderate. So there really was no shift. But people were saying, this is the switch in time that saved 9. The switch in time that saved 9. That is, the switch in 9 justices, right? That saved 9 of them. The switch in time that saved 9. You ever hear the expression, stitch in time saved 9? This was the switch in time saved 9. No? A stitch in time.
I read it, but I didn't know.
Yeah, so in the next section I explain what it means. A stitch in time saves 9 means if you if you mend something, if you fix something in advance, it saves time down the road. So like if you stitch socks, for example, right? You put a patch in a sock, you save the sock. So a stitch in time that saved 9, the switch in time that saved 9, right? So this was not dramatic. They weren't responding to Roosevelt, but it was a fact that after 37, Owen Roberts started voting with the liberal wing. He did. Now, in the next 2 or 3 years, the justices who were conservative started to retire. There were 4 of them. They were called the 4 horsemen of the Supreme Court. And you know the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse from the Old Testament, right? Nice New Testament, actually, yeah. From the New Testament, what do I know? Ask me about kosher, I can tell you. New Testament, I can't help you guys. This is why you're off Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. Enjoy. So they were called the 4 horsemen. There was Justice Van Devanter, Justice McReynolds, Justice Sutherland, and Justice Butler. There were 4 of them. And this 4 conservatives, they were a block, and they always voted together. And they struck down whatever law they saw. They were very conservative, right? And after 37, they retired one at a time. And by the time Roosevelt was done, he made 9 appointments to the Supreme Court. 9. So basically, everyone in the court was his guy. And they would have a very differential view of federal power. So when you see this sort of progression, this laddering up, you have to keep in mind this wasn't just an organic change in constitutional law, but Roosevelt actually appointed a bunch of new justices who changed the direction of constitutional law. And Roosevelt recognized that what they were doing was something different. One of Roosevelt's key advisors, his name was Rexford Tugwell. What a good name, Rexford Tugwell. He said that, I'll give you a quote, squaring New Deal policies with the Constitution required, quote, tortured interpretations of a document intended to prevent them. They recognized that they were torturing the Constitution. They understood that, but they thought it was that important for the national economy. they considered amendments to the Constitution that was too hard. To have an amendment, you have to have 2/3 of the states, and 3/4 of it's hard. It's a lot of hard work. So it's much easier to appoint one new justice than to amend the Constitution, and that's exactly what they did. So we get to 37, and the key case. This case was so important, far more important than West Coast Hotel. West Coast Hotel was a pittance. We have a 5-4 decision in our favorite NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, versus Jones and Laughlin Steele. What am I up to? Mark, are you next? You've been waiting. Yeah. Go ahead. Give us the facts, please, in NLRB.
Alright, so, during this time, or 2 years prior to this case, the National Labor Relations Act was enacted and created.
Good.
Essentially, it was they created the National Labor Relations Board, which would enforce the federal labor practice standards, and it basically allowed employees to unionize bargaining collectively and prohibit unfair discrimination and taxes. So the plaintiff in this case, JLSC, who's the employer,
Ooh, JLSC. I like that. You shortened it.
Yes, it's very
Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
So they're the employer. They're the 4th largest producer of steel at the time in the country, and during this time, they fired several of their employees who attempted to unionize, I guess, at one of their plants. And so the board ended up sanctioning the employer for engaging in discriminatory employment practices
Very
in
good.
violation of the act.
Very good. All right, thank you. And Lucian. Oh, I think I got it. I forget, remind me. I think I got it now. Lucian. What? I said it right? Lucian. Lucian.
I'm not asking my
So Lucian. So the National Labor Relations Act, right? What was the constitutional basis for the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act? What was the constitutional basis for that law? You only have a few options. If I ask you what's the constitutional basis, I'm asking for clauses, so I have a couple to think about. What are the bases for the NLRA?
I guess it's talking about injury to commerce.
Okay, the Commerce Clause, and what else? What always encompasses?
Article 1.8.
Okay, very good. So what was the specific, Lucian, one more for you. What was the specific action that was regulated in this case? What specifically was the government regulating? Okay, hiring and firing people, right? Is your last question, right? Is hiring and firing people interstate commerce by itself?
No.
Is that intercourse among the states? Okay, so Gibbons, not there. Jeremy, we go next to the necessary and proper clause. Okay? Under the rule in Schechter Poultry and E.C. Knight, does hiring and firing people have a direct effect on interstate commerce?
No, it does not.
It does not. But what does the court do here with E.C.
But
Knight
the
test?
court here says that because most of their business is outside of the state, that it does affect interstate commerce,
So,
and it is necessary.
Local wages, do the local wages directly affect interstate commerce?
In the court held that it does because the product is.
Does the court stick with the direct effect test? No. What test do they adopt, Jeremy? A different test. You have so many tests. You have so many tests this semester. You said it? Yeah?
Substantial.
Substantial effects.
Yes, thank you.
Very good. So again, we have a progression, right? In E.C. Knight and Schechter Poultry, they apply the direct effect. That is, the local activity must have a direct effect in interstate commerce. Here, they modify. They say, so long as the local activity has a substantial effect on interstate commerce, then Congress can regulate it. If hiring and firing workers in a local plant has a substantial effect in interstate commerce, they can be regulated. Justin, what's the difference between direct effect and substantial effect. Just language, right? What's the difference between the two things?
That's a great question.
I know, that's what I'm asking.
That's a great answer.
No, it's not a good answer, because it means there's no answer. It betrays the fact you know the answer. What's the difference between substantial effect and direct
Well, I guess a direct effect is you can find, I don't know how to say it without using the word, but a direct relationship between the activity and commerce. And indirect with the substantially affects it.
Okay, so let's try this with examples, right? So let's say that, I'll give you an example. Let's say Congress regulates the crates, the boxes used to transport products from one state to another. Would that have a direct effect in interstate commerce? You know, the shipping crates.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe yes, maybe not. If I said Congress can regulate railroads that travel from one state to the other carrying the goods, is that a direct effect in interstate commerce?
Yes.
Yeah. Right? So you can see different grades, right? It's not just one more question. What if Congress regulates the safety equipment of the people working on the loading docks, who are loading ships and loading trains for interstate commerce?
I think this is a gray area we're talking about.
Gray area. Yeah, everyone sees it's a little bit less clear. Now, people working in a steel mill, they're not shipping stuff, but they're working in a steel mill that creates steel, which will eventually maybe make its way downriver. Can they regulate the wages of the people in the steel mill and the conditions of the steel mill workers, if under the direct effect test?
No.
Okay. So it's harder to show a direct effect, but now, Justin, last one, I'll let you go. Could you say that the conditions of workers in the steel mill might have a substantial effect in interstate commerce?
Yes.
Why?
Well, you know, if they don't have good safety regulations, people won't want to work for them.
Very good.
And skilled labor won't want to work for them for sure.
Very good, very good, very good. So everyone see the difference, right? It's hard to satisfy the direct effect test. It's not easy. It wasn't supposed to be easy. That's why they adopted that test. But the substantial effects test is a lot easier to satisfy because look, if we don't pay these workers good wages, maybe they'll go work somewhere else. And if we don't give them good wages, maybe they won't be safe in the job and they'll make shoddy steel, low quality material. Right? So the key move, the key change in NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel was the adoption, right? Was the adoption of the substantial effects test. Right? They got rid of EC Knight, they got rid of the check. They don't actually check your poultry. It's curious. They do get rid of the EC Knight test, but that's not there. And the key word becomes affecting commerce. That's what the statute says. That the agency has the power to regulate labor conditions that affect commerce. Again, when you see affect commerce, you think necessary and proper. When you see affect commerce, you think has a substantial effect on interstate commerce. It doesn't have to be direct, it can be substantial. Okay? Therefore, the court upholds the National Labor Relations Act because it has a substantial effect on interstate commerce. It's fine.
Can you please repeat when you read the rule about the agency has the power to something?
The agency has the power to regulate labor conditions that affects commerce. Okay?
Okay, so in this case, when I was reading it, about the application of the commerce clause was due to the fact that companies did their business interstate, and that's the way in which the government was able to apply the commerce clause.
But be very careful. What exactly was being regulated? Were they regulating the work conditions people going from state to state?
No, I really regulated.
Exactly. That's the point I made the asset class. If they were regulating the shipment of steel from one state to the other, that's interstate commerce. That's given. That's intercourse. That's fine. But here they're regulating specifically the local labor conditions, wages, etc. But those wages and labor conditions has an effect on their interstate business.
right? Because the steel they're making affects what gets sent out to other states, and that's what they can regulate.
So doesn't that, so that like kind of merges
No, it does not, and don't conflate them. When you see the word affects, that means necessary and proper. That's the tell. Again, the court doesn't make this clear, but you should know better.
But you just, I thought, well, I did it until a second ago. Because then you said affecting commerce makes substantial effect.
Good.
Sorry, so that was good about it. Good, that's commerce.
No. Interstate, it's not just commerce, it's interstate commerce. Local, no, let's do this, right? Because if you have this question, 10 people have the same question. If local working conditions, is that interstate commerce, just local working conditions? No. But can local working conditions have a substantial effect on interstate commerce?
Yes, they can.
Bingo. So this is not supported under the Commerce Clause, but it is supported under the substantial effects and necessary and proper laws. You said it correct. You did it right. You stole your question. That's fine.
Okay, so Jack.
Okay, yeah. Go
So
ahead.
Jack, okay, so in essence, then, the substantial effects test basically was a way to just expand the power of Congress.
Yes.
Since this other test was much harder to prove.
The direct effects test was very narrow, right?
Right.
Look at our picture, right?
Yeah, I didn't have it in front of me. I'm just.
Look at our picture, right? The direct effects test was fairly narrow in EC Knight and a little bit broader in Spectre. But by NLRB, it expanded it. And then it went off to the races. Okay? Whenever you see the word effect, just think necessary and proper. It will make your life easier.
Why did they expand?
I'm sorry?
What, I mean, historically, I mean, what was the, there had to be something behind expanding it.
They wanted Congress to be able to address various social conditions that states wouldn't. They wanted to be able to impose a single uniform system of labor laws that affect nationwide. Because if a state, because I mean, there's a related issue that comes from Darby, right? If Congress is regulating something, that means the states can't.
Right.
They're preempting all local labor laws and setting a uniform system of economy, right? So think about it. Let's say that New York has very generous labor laws and North Carolina doesn't. Stuff is made cheaper in North Carolina than it will be in New York. And that puts New York at a disadvantage for protecting its workers. The idea here was you have one system uniform nationwide. Mia? And then Nisha.
I was just gonna say, so Congress is theoretically, they're limited by their enumerated powers.
Right.
So what you said last class was the necessary and proper clause, how it's interpreted, how much implied power they can get from that, as long as they can link it back to an enumerated power, like the Commerce Clause say, the ends are to regulate commerce. If the means are regulating local labor conditions, then it is justified.
Now it is,
right?
in this case at least. It was upheld in this case.
Because
Let me answer your
as
question more
long
broadly.
as it has substantial effect at some point.
So if you notice at the very end of the opinion, there's they say we still have some limits, right? They say we're not obliterating the distinction between what's national and what's local, right? Because that would create a completely centralized government. So they say that at the end. Do they really mean it?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Johnson. She's right. They keep saying it because once they give it away, they give away the ball game. It's like, all right, screw it. You were right. There's no difference what the states can defend them. So they keep, there's a line. We don't know where that line is, there's a line. But let me tell you something, that line, really small line.
Yep.
But they say, look, we're not obliterating the distinction what's national, what's local. Well, when you get to Wickard, when you get to Rach later, it gets a lot harder. So let's do,
That's fake news, right there.
that's what? Fake news.
This is fake news.
That's what I thought you said.
That's fake news.
I have to, sometimes I have to play back what students say in my head, I have to rewind. So the next case, Darby, which I'll do fairly quickly because it's not much of a addition, is about whether Congress can prohibit the shipment of interstate commerce of lumber manufactured. Okay, so they can do the shipment, that's not a problem. But can they prohibit workmen from earning less than minimum wage? Right? That's the question I asked you at the outset of class today, right? 1937. We already said the answer here is constitutional. Once you get to the substantial effects test, it's easy, right? if the wood here is meant to be shipped across state lines, then the wages paid to those lumberjacks, right? The wages paid to the lumberjacks have a substantial effect on that interstate wood. So therefore, Congress can regulate the wages of the workers. Even though the wages are local, these lumberjacks never leave the state, but their wages has a substantial effect in interstate commerce. And here they actually overrule Hammer versus Dagenhart expressly. Hammer versus Dagenhart was a child labor case, right? That Congress tried to prohibit shipment of interstate. Congress tried to prohibit the shipment of goods made with child labor. And remember, the court said, no, you can't do that. You can't regulate local conditions. Here, they express overrule Hammer. Without any question, they depart from it. Yeah, they kill it. They say Hammer is not good law. They say the 10th Amendment makes no difference, right? Congress can regulate these local conditions, notwithstanding the 10th Amendment. And here again, they don't really say necessary and proper. They talk about the effect and the appropriate ends, right? When you see the word appropriate, right? When you see appropriate, that means necessary and proper. They're sort of like clues, like hints, where they're saying what they're not really telling you, but they hinted it. Okay. But so far, so good. You know, Jones and Laughlin Steel, you know, it involves a steel mill. That sounds like commerce, right? Interstate commerce. They ship stuff. Darby, okay, they ship wood across state lines. Okay, that's interstate commerce, right? But then you get to the next case. Wickard. This was a big deal. A huge deal, this case. This case gave everything away, right? The court was so divided in this case, they had to re-argue it and have a second round because they couldn't decide what to do. In fact, this is in your video, one justice, Justice Jackson, very famous justice, considered saying, you know what, guys, let's just drop the charade, right? Fake news. Let's just admit it. Congress can do whatever it wants. Let's stop trying to pretend this line's here. I think that would be more honest. I think they're more, candid. Admit what you're doing. Don't just tell us there's a line that doesn't really exist. But the court wouldn't go that far. So, who am I up to? Okay. We horrible?
It was bad.
You know, this case, whenever I talk to, my parents aren't attorneys, but this case, like, what do you mean local weed? Like, people actually get this case. For whatever reason, this case is very easy to get. Yeah, Andrew, you want to give us, please, the facts in Wickard?
Yes. So Roscoe Philburn is a farmer.
Oh, let me pause you. Funny story. So his name was actually Roscoe Philbrun, and he changed it, I think, due to some sort of anti-German animus, right? Totally random. I met a guy named Philbrun about a month ago. He was a lawyer. And he said, yeah, just like the Hates, but, different. I was, no, his name was Philbrun. It was a guy's nephew. They were actually related, right? It was like a great nephew or something. His entire life, Philbrun from Ohio, they were related. Anyway, I make these connections and people are crazy. Yeah, Andrew, go.
Yes, so Roscoe Philbrun is...
You guys pay attention, I love it.
He is a farmer in Ohio.
Very good.
And he farms a bunch of different stuff, including, he has a herd of dairy cattle. He sells milk, raises chickens, and sells eggs. But then he also plants winter wheat.
Winter wheat.
The wheat is what's going on at issue in this case. And so there was an act passed.
Mm-hmm.
The act was the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938.
Good.
And what that one said is that the government can tells you how much wheat you can grow.
Whoa. Do they tell you how much wheat you can grow?
They give you notice of an allotment.
Okay, what if you exceed that allotment?
I'm sorry,
what if you exceed the quota that they set for you?
You're fine.
You're
right?
fine. Okay, very good. So let's just make the point clear. So it wasn't like the government sent someone to your house, and if you grew one extra piece of wheat, they arrest you, right? You can, in theory, grow as much wheat as you want, but they're gonna fine you, right? Andrew, why, in the middle of a depression, would Congress enact a law limiting the food supply? Just it's not in your book, but just think about it.
Yeah, because everyone was growing a bunch of food, and so
God forbid, right?
supply was up, and it drove prices down.
And then who's that
then
hurt?
all the farmers were
Hurts the
broke.
farmers, right? You know, nothing's new, right? This is it's protectionism. This was a law designed to protect farmers. There's no other way. I mean, we're in the middle of a depression. People are starving, you know, but we have to limit the amount of wheat. We still have laws like this today. There was a case at the Supreme Court a couple years ago involving raisins. To this day, well, not anymore, but until recently, the Supreme Court had a case where Congress put a quota on how many raisins you could grow. And this is almost like from the Depression. This one guy named Porn, who was a farmer in California, he did not want to comply with the raisin quotas. He wanted to grow as many raisins as he wanted. And the government actually sent like a truck to his house to pick up his excess raisins. And he's like, no, I'm not giving them to you. So they sent him a fine. And this is this case called Horn versus U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's a crazy case. The farmer won eventually, which he should have won. I teach this case in property also. Anyway, these laws still exist. So Philbrun, as he was originally known, was a wheat farmer. And this is a Secretary of the Agriculture, Claude Wickard. And I love this picture. You can't really see it from here, but behind it are these graphs. And these are the various prices for commodities. Where you have these brainiacs, right, who would say this is the correct price for wheat, and this is how much corn we should produce. They would decide the economy as a whole because they knew everything.
They knew everything.
The invisible hand knows more, but they thought they knew, they would do it, and so they set a quota for Philbrun. So the facts of this case were that Philbrun grew this wheat for local consumption, for his family, and for his chickens. That probably wasn't true.
I believed him.
What'd you say, Janice?
I believed him.
You believe him? I don't. The amount of wheat he was growing, that much. Do you know wheat?
No.
How many bushels was it? It was a lot, right?
It was 239 additional.
Can someone who knows farm tell me, is that like a lot? Any Aggies? Oh, God.
A couple of loaves of bread.
All right, I don't know. I'm from New York, but I don't. But from what I've read, he was selling this wheat on the black market, right?
Oh, okay.
They kind of said in there that he did grow some.
They hinted that, the record's not really clear. They sort of hinted at this. This is why the case probably should have been remanded for further fact-finding. There was a lot of evidence that he was actually selling this wheat, right? Why would someone risk a fine from the government to feed their chickens, right? He was making money on the side. Yeah, I think. Anyway, but we don't know for sure. But so let's just pretend he wasn't. Let's pretend this wheat was local. So if this wheat was indeed local, it was never going to leave his farm, right? The seeds were local, the manure was local, the rainwater was local. What else needs to grow wheat? I don't even know. Everything about the product was local. Nothing ever crossed state lines. He goes in a cellar, goes right into his stomach, to his cow's stomach, goes right back to the soil, fertilizer, and the circle, whatever. It's not my fault. So then there it is, you got it. So then Sahar, how could Congress regulate this activity, right? So you have this activity, right? Growing wheat, right? Growing wheat. Is that by itself interstate commerce? No, it's not. Okay, so what clause do we look to, Sahar? That's right. And we look to the necessary and proper clause.
And so in this case, they expanded the substantial effect test, and they said that even if a small amount of Philbrun wheat itself did not have a substantial effect on interstate commerce, when all of the locally consumed wheat nationwide is considered together in the aggregate, it has a substantial effect. So the aggregation.
Very good. So we had a couple years earlier, 37, NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel. And it had this substantial effects test. And the word substantial means, a lot, right? It has some significant effect, right? The steel mill employed a lot of workers. If all those workers come together and they're all being paid these low wages, it can screw up the interstate market for steel. Okay? Darby. You had a company that was shipping lumber across state lines, and all the workers had low wages. It might create, poor lumber, timber, whatever, right? But here, you couldn't do that. because this was never going to be shipped across state lines, right? Filburn by himself will never have a substantial effect in interstate commerce. He might have a minimal effect, like a slight effect on interstate commerce. But here's the court's move. They add on to the substantial effects test. They add another layer to it. You love these tests, right, guys? We get another test. This is called the aggregation principle, or the aggregation doctrine. You see it both ways. What does aggregation mean? You add it all together. So even if Filburn by himself doesn't have a substantial effect in interstate commerce, if all the farmers nationwide started to grow local wheat to get around this requirement, then they would undercut this federal regulation. They would have an effect on the geniuses and their price controls, right? Now, is there any evidence that other farmers were doing this? Zero. I'm sorry, Marcus?
Purely theoretical.
Exactly, that's right. It's speculative. It's theoretical. They ask, is it rational to believe that some farmers are doing this? Right? Is it a rational belief? Yeah. And that's enough. If a court can make stuff up, right, it's about fake news, if they can basically make up facts, if they can hypothesize facts to support the substantial effect, then Congress can regulate it. Everyone's saying. Right. So then what we have is a situation where now we have a substantial effects test plus aggregation. And so long as the court can imagine in its head how 1 million local farmers are keeping their wheat off the market, and that might have a substantial effect in interstate commerce, Congress can regulate it. Even if not a single one of these farmers actually does it, doesn't matter. So now, this is why Justice Jackson was so conflicted. He wanted to be honest. What Janice said a minute ago, just be honest, right? Is there now a difference in what's national, what's local, or do we obliterate the distinction? You know, after Wickard, there's some stuff Congress can't regulate, but it's a pretty small amount. And we'll discuss some of those cases in class on on Monday of next week with Lopez and Morrison. But here, so long as, I'll give you the test here, right? If you have an economic activity that has substantial effect, Congress can regulate it. And even if that single economic activity doesn't have a substantial effect, you can aggregate lots of economic activities together. And if those aggregated economic activities have substantial effect in interstate commerce, then Congress can regulate it under the necessary and proper clause. Again, you can aggregate many different economic activities to generate a substantial effect in interstate commerce, and Congress can regulate it, all the activities, under the necessary and proper clause. These are not Commerce Clause cases, my friends. These are necessary and proper clause cases. Do not get confused. They don't even mention necessary and proper in the case, but that's what's going on. Sure, don't believe me, but that's what's going on. Most law students don't get this either. Professors, perhaps also. Yes, Kyle.
So I know you told me to wait.
What did I tell you to wait for?
As far as like how the federal government can regulate or supersede the state's choices to
Of marijuana.
Yeah.
Wait till Monday. The case for Gonzalez versus Raich answers that question.
Because it seems like we're getting there, right? Like if they can just imagine that any aggregation, like all this.
Yeah. Read Gonzalez versus Raich for Monday. Actually, my colleague Randy, he argued that case. That's his case. That's his baby. And the video for that was kind of funny. It's like little cartoons. Anyone watch the video for that one yet? For Raich? That's a good video. Randy argues, we actually use the oral argument audio from the Supreme Court, and we put in like a little cartoon. It's cute.
Aww. But does it have to do with aggregation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just watch the video. I can't get my head on this. It's a hazard. Although I figured I can plug my computer here and I won't trip anymore. So I'm slowly making this, unsafe working conditions at South Texas. They're very. Why would someone put this thing here? It's such a bad idea to have this step right where I'm walking. I've fallen. It's bad. All right. I'm sorry? Congress.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, all right. these classrooms look the same for the last 30 years. They haven't changed at all. I'm sure these chairs suck, I know. We have our faculty meeting in this room. Those chairs are not, yeah, that's why I'm standing. Okay, so that's Holding and Wickard. Let's go back to our timeline. So, you know, Wickard goes beyond Darby and LRB because it adds the aggregation principle. That's the new thing that Wickard adds. That's 42. All right. Questions? Oh, Sergio.
Just a quick question. I noticed you have Wickard at a lower level than Knox or Prigg.
Yeah, I do. I think that the language in Prigg and the language in Knox is even broader than Wickard. Wickard at least pretends that there's some limit, but Prigg and Knox basically don't admit any limits whatsoever. In fact, Prigg, I might put Prigg higher than Knox. I go back and forth on this one. Prigg didn't even require an enumerated power. It concerned the relations between the states. That's pretty broad. And then Knox, I think they were just pissed at the losing in the legal tender case. They had this really broad test. If you want to read Knox, and you can take my word for it, if you want to read Knox language, I didn't assign it. The language is real broad. Okay. Any other questions on Wickard? Okay. Our next two cases, we jump ahead about 30 years. So we're done with the New Deal, and we go on to the Warren Court, which was began in 1952 and ended in the early 70s. We have two cases from 1964, Heart of Atlanta Motel and Katzenbach v. McClung. Oh, you want to hear a crazy story? This is crazy. So I have this picture on my blog, right, of the pool. So this is the Heart of Atlanta Motel. It was a segregated hotel in Atlanta, Georgia. And I always show in class this photograph of a boat inside the pool and this woman sitting in the boat, you know, waving. I swear, she graduated already. This was 2 or 3 years ago. A girl says, "That's my aunt." She said, there's this picture in her aunt's house of her in a boat in a pool, and they never even knew what it was. Like, never even asked. So her aunt was like, I think this was her pageant winner or something, and was advertising for this hotel. She told me that after class. You can guess why. I mean, she had no idea until she saw this picture. Anyway, so you have the Heart of Atlanta Motel, which was a hotel in Georgia that didn't serve African American patrons. And then you have Ollie's Barbecue, which was a segregated barbecue shop in Alabama. So they were actually open until fairly recently, and I bought a case of their sauce, which I've never actually. I don't even like barbecue sauce, but I have a case of it. It's all expired. Expiration date like 2008 or 9. It's old, but I did find something actually very important, right? So I have an eBay alert for all these cases, lots of stuff, and I found a matchbook from. That's what they looked like when they were new. The color is faded, as you can tell. I'll put it over here. The color has faded significantly. Yeah, it's gross. I wouldn't even try it. But I found on eBay a matchbook from Ollie's Barbecue. And the question was, did this barbecue joint actually ship stuff or do stuff in interstate commerce? And no, we're a local barbecue joint. But this matchbook, if you look at it carefully, it says, no, hey, World's Best. The Universal Match Company from Atlanta. So they actually obtained matchbooks from out of state. Proof that their activity had a substantial effect on interstate commerce. I'm like Supreme Court Sherlock Holmes, right? You're welcome. I figured this out.
You hold it like evidence.
This took me forever to figure out. Oh my God, this took me so long to figure out because I found the match company was based in Atlanta. I did all this research.
Wow.
Wait, this is the Heart of Atlanta Hotel.
This is the Katzenbach and McClung, Ollie's Barbecue. This is the barbecue
Yeah,
sauce.
you just talking about both.
I'm doing both cases at once, so I'll look back to you, okay? So these cases were applications of doctrine. I want to take a slight detour and talk about the 14th Amendment, right? We will spend the second half of the semester on the 14th Amendment, right? The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868 following the Civil War. And it did lots of things, the 14th Amendment. One of the things it did was it gave Congress a new enumerated power. Up to this point, virtually all the enumerated powers were in Article 1, Section 8. Thank you very much. But there's a new power on the block. It's called Section 5. Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, also called the enforcement power. Section 5 of the 14th Amendment gave Congress the power to enforce by appropriate legislation. What's what appropriate remind you of?
Necessary and proper.
Necessary and proper clause, right? So it's giving Congress an implied power to enforce the provisions of this article. And that refers back to Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. And in the 14th Amendment, you have what's called the Equal Protection Clause, which we'll study in 2 months or so. And it basically says the laws protect everyone equally. We'll get to exactly what that means later. In 1870, Congress enacted a statute that made it a crime to segregate places of public accommodation. Not 1970, 1870. In 1870, Congress said, if you exclude African American patrons from your public accommodation, like a hotel or a restaurant, you are a criminal. Not a fine, you go to jail. Why have you never heard of this? Right? Why do we have Jim Crow if it was a crime to segregate?
They said it was from fraud.
Exactly. In a case called the Civil Rights Cases, 1883, check me the year. Yes. 83, yeah. The Civil Rights Cases, 1883. The Supreme Court said that the Civil Rights Act was unconstitutional. Why? Because the 14th Amendment was limited to state action. Congress can only prohibit state-sanctioned segregation. And if you segregate your business, it's not state action. That was wrong for a lot of reasons, one of which common carriers, public accommodations, were basically state actors. They were monopolies. And then a couple years later in Plessy, they said, yeah, you can't separate but equal. So it didn't even matter, right? It was irrelevant. But the Supreme Court actually set aside the Civil Rights Act of 1870, or 75. There were a couple of them. They set them all aside, unconstitutional. Congress would not try to put another Civil Rights Act together until 1950-something, right? They'd wait almost 80 years. And throughout that time, Jim Crow pervaded the South. And by the time you got to 64, you had segregation not just in the South, but also in the North. These were places were everywhere. Okay? And Congress said, if you have a place of public accommodation, a hotel, a restaurant, train station, etc., you could not segregate on the basis of race. Now, Congress said, we're relying on our Section 5 powers, even though the civil rights cases said you can't do that. But again, is Congress bound by the Supreme Court's decisions? Or can they try it again? Congress said, we think this is constitutional. Only Justice Douglas, William O. Douglas, and he wrote a concurring opinion, which is in your book, said that Section 5 of the 14th Amendment supports this Civil Rights Act. I think he's actually right. I think the concurrence is a lot better than the majority. It's a weird thing to say that you have an amendment about racial equality, but you have to use the Commerce Clause to prohibit segregation. It's a very strange thing, right? That the reason why Heart of Atlanta is correct is that people moving are articles of commerce. It's a weird thing. It always never sat quite well with me. That you have something that says equal protection, it says it right there. And that'd be a much stronger basis to eradicate segregation. Because then you have to worry about, well, is it commerce? Does it affect this or this? Right? But only Douglas goes along with it. I think the reason why is they don't want to overturn the civil rights cases. And to this day, the civil rights cases are still good law. To this day. All right? So we're stuck with the Commerce Clause. Right? Who am I up to? Is it Austin? So Austin, why is the Heart of Atlanta Motel, the segregated hotel in Georgia, why can Congress regulate its policy of renting rooms?
Well, they said it was a public accommodation.
That's true, but then there's no public accommodation clause in the Constitution. What gives Congress the power to regulate the renting of rooms?
They use the Commerce Clause and the necessary...
Okay, so let's start one at a time. Is renting a room in Atlanta, is that interstate commerce? That's not commerce. So what clause do you rely on? Very good. So what's the argument in necessary and proper?
The argument was that the motels had a substantial effect on interstate commerce. commerce because people travel between states.
Good.
And to go to the hotel, and they also, there are a number of studies that said locations that participated in racial discrimination, less money was spent there, people didn't go there, professionals were less likely to settle there.
Very good, perfect answer. Very good, thank you, Austin. Congress made findings that having racial segregation in hotels and the like imposed burdens on interstate commerce. Why? Because you couldn't stop to go to sleep. It was too dangerous. In fact, anyone ever see this book before? Ever hear about this? Yeah. It was called the Negro Motorist Green Book. It was actually published by African American groups to tell you if you're traveling in this jurisdiction, here are the hotels you can stop at. Here are the garages. Here are the beauty parlors, right? Here are the theaters you can stop at, right? You didn't know if you can stop in the right place. Because you stop in the wrong place, it could be very dangerous, right? And there often were segregated accommodations inside the road, but you have to know where they are. You actually find these books in the Library of Congress website. I've actually checked Houston. You can see them in places that you could actually go visit. But these burdens on interstate commerce existed. It turned out that the Heart of Atlanta Motel, I think was 75% of their business was interstate. They advertised in other states, they had billboards by the highway. So the court said that the decision to deny a room to an African American patron has a substantial effect on interstate commerce. Right? That's easy. I think that follows from NLRB. That's not difficult. Right? This is like the people that ship wood across state lines, they ship steel. Here they're a hotel. And they're blocking the channels of commerce. Remember that phrase, channels of commerce. We'll see that next week in the reading. Channels of commerce. Right? If you're driving from New York to Florida, you got to stop somewhere in between. Okay, so that's Heart of Atlanta. Heart of Atlanta is a little bit easier, right? Because they actually do business in interstate commerce. So if you look at our graph, our timeline, Heart of Atlanta is basically the same level as Wickard, right? I think it's more or less the same as Wickard. I don't think it does anything more than what Wickard did. But Kenesha, we go to the next case, Ollie's Barbecue. That's my grotesque barbecue sauce, right? What were the facts there? Why were the facts different, I should say, in Ollie's Barbecue?
Because they said that the facts were all different. It was different because they said that the part of the Lincoln Hotel was about hotel, was about hotel. It didn't have a restaurant. And so this was the place for a restaurant. I have a question. Yeah, please. So I was gonna ask when I read this, I thought it was interesting to base the whole racial segregation on commerce, because if you look at how the definition comes up, but the necessary and proper and broad and all that. So if somebody, the Supreme Court one day decides that they want to change the scope, we can be totally segregated.
Well, isn't that Justice Douglas' point, right? That's what Justice Douglas put in the current opinion. In other words, if the Supreme Court were to go back to the direct effect test, then the Civil Rights Act becomes unconstitutional. The Section 5 provides a very strong basis for it, regardless of commerce. So it's a fair point. Well, at least federal. The federal government can do it. All right. Okay, so on to the facts.
Okay. It was about injustice relief against the appeal on the constitutionality of the act, the Civil Rights Act, as applied to restaurants and to hotels. And so this restaurant was a barbecue place. It was family owned, had a sizable seating capacity. It was right off of a highway. Was kind of the point. It was 11 blocks from an interstate highway, but they had, so the restaurant actually catered to family and white collar trade and then takeout service for Negroes. But the employees were Negroes. They just couldn't keep their appearance. And then after the passing of the act, the restaurant purchased, so they were talking about how much food, you know, the restaurant was purchasing like locally, and then how much they got from out of state.
So Kanisha, let me, because in the interest of time, we're running to the clock, I don't want people to be late. So let me ask this question. Did this restaurant ship food out of state lines?
It's brought me.
I'm going to time.
Food out.
Did they ship state across state
They
lines?
didn't ship food out.
Did they solicit customers from out of state?
Yes.
Did they?
They had the meeting.
Was that the fact?
No, they didn't.
Okay, so did they advertise to customers out of state?
No.
Is there any evidence?
No, not in here.
Is there any evidence that people from out of state travel to Birmingham to get barbecue? Okay. So this is different than the Heart of Atlanta. There's no evidence that they advertised out of state. There's no evidence that customers came from out of state to barbecue. So then what's the hook? It's called the, Kanisha, what's the jurisdictional hook between this business and the Commerce Clause? How do they hook it in?
This is essential.
Well, but what is the hook? Where do they?
The travelers, because it said that the
Not the travelers. Not the travelers. What is the hook? What about this business had a substantial effect?
Oh, it's interstate.
Not the
I
segregation.
don't know.
You said it a minute ago. You corrected me a minute ago on this one.
She said you corrected me.
You interrupted me. Told me the answer. Brooke, you want
They bought the food.
They brought the food in.
Yeah.
Yes, you said that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Brooke. They brought the food in. So because they purchase food that comes in interstate commerce into the restaurant, their segregation then has a substantial effect on interstate commerce. Right? I'm sorry?
No.
So what?
Attenuated.
You're right. Why is it attenuated?
Well, I mean, one of the other cases was like, it doesn't apply here, but like, the way that they do the math, it doesn't actually add up. I mean, the end
Is the
result
effect
is right.
substantial or is it a minimal effect?
It's de minimis.
But what if you aggregated all the segregated barbecue joints in the South?
But
Wouldn't
you're saying that those people aren't going to buy groceries and carry them with them?
Well,
or
no, all I'm
that they're
saying
not
is,
gonna go to
if
a
you had
different
every
restaurant?
segregated barbecue, if it's
Right.
buying beef from other states, is that an effect in the interstate beef market?
Mm-hmm.
Or vegetables that aren't grown in that state?
Yeah.
Right? Or
But
ketchup
then,
from
But
pop.
then black businesses are going to buy beef from people who will sell
But you're
them.
thinking about this too mathematically. It's not about precision. It's in the aggregate, could this have an effect? It's what's called rational. Could it have an effect? If the answer is maybe, that's good enough. It doesn't have to be an actually demonstrated effect, right? There's no evidence in the record that this will have an effect on commerce, but could it? That's enough.
That's enough.
But the court here, I think, opens the door, right? Because once you say, well, even if your business doesn't do interstate commerce, if your ingredients do, then you are involved in interstate commerce. The video uses this memorable phrase, the herpes theory of interstate commerce. Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
That if your business ever touches interstate commerce, then you're tainted, you're infected. And yeah. And once you have the herpes, you can't get rid of it, right?
Oh.
Now you'll remember.
Intercourse, and now he's talking about herpes.
Well, you're adults. Let's be adults. You're the adults.
Done now.
You're the adults. Don't bring it. I've actually had people bring their kids to class, and I had it when they came to the First Amendment. I did the fuck the draft case, and her kid was sitting there. I was like, okay, I'm going for it. So if you want to bring your kids, don't do the second last day of class, or you can. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Anyway. So we're almost short on time, so let me try to summarize this, right, as best as I can. We start class today with Schechter for Poultry, which more or less retains the direct effect test from tonight. So that test is abandoned in Jones and Laughlin Steele for the substantial effect test. It's expanded in Darby. And when you get to Wickard, you have substantial effects plus aggregation. And once you can aggregate many little effects to make a substantial effect, there's not much of a limit. But you still need to have some connection to interstate commerce, so you're shipping whatever. With Heart of Atlanta, more or less the same, but then Casabat says even if your food is tainted by interstate commerce, then everything in your restaurant is the same, you can regulate everything. But we're not done yet. Wait till we get to Rach. We do Rach, you can't see on the plot, but we'll do Gonzalez versus Rach. The purple, that is about the maximum. Okay? Any questions?
I just have a quick one.
Ella and then Jess?
Is that posted?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I put the link up and I'll put it up again. Yeah, Janice.
Oh, no, you know what, I answered it.
Good. All right, any other
This is about
questions?
race, this is not about, I was thinking about that case where they didn't allow the gay couple to buy, I think it was a cake?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but that was the only race.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? I'll see you all on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend.
Why is Wickard not higher than all the others?